The Year of the Unburdened. The Secret Tradition of Nyandira. Before I tell you this story, I need you to understand something about the place where it happened. There is a valley in the heart of East Africa, one the big maps mark only as terrain, not as a place where people carry their deepest beliefs. The locals call it Nyandira, and in Nyandira, marriage is not the finish line. It is the beginning of a test. Because in Nyandira, after every wedding, after every feast, after the last drum goes quiet, the groom is taken, alone, into a circle of fire and silence, and 5 elders, who never explain themselves, decide his fate. Either he carries his home from that very night, or he is given something almost no one in the world ever receives, a full year of rest, of honor, of peace, no labor, no burden, no obligation. They call it the Year of the Unburdened. And here is what has confused outsiders for generations. The strongest men in Nyandira have been denied it, the wealthiest, the most powerful, the most feared, rejected. And yet, some of the most ordinary, overlooked, quiet men in the valley have been chosen. Nobody could explain it until the story of Tarek Mbele. Drop a comment right now if you want to know why he was chosen. I'll be reading every single one. The world of Nyandira. Let me paint you a picture. Nyandira Valley sits about 4 hours southeast of the fictional coastal city of Kavuno, a buzzing, chaotic port town full of import warehouses, mobile money kiosks, and the kind of traffic that makes you feel like time is moving faster than it should. I head inland from Kavuno and the world changes. The roads go from tarmac to red earth. The baobab trees get older and wider. The air gets thicker, not with pollution, but with something harder to name. History, maybe. Or maybe just the particular weight of a community that has been doing things the same way for a very long time, and has decided deliberately not to stop. Nyandira Valley is not poor, but it is not rich in the way Kavuno is rich. There are no shopping centers, no influencers broadcasting from there. What it has is this, a tradition that has outlasted everything else. The tradition goes like this. When a couple in Nyandira decides to marry, the wedding itself is celebrated the way weddings everywhere are celebrated. Food, music, dancing, color, noise, joy. But when the last guest goes home and the fire dies down to embers, the groom is called. He goes alone to the elders' circle, a space outside the main village marked by 5 flat stones arranged in a ring around a low fire. Waiting there are 5 elders. They are known collectively as the Council of Gray Ash. The name comes from the fire they sit beside, which burns not with wood but with a mixture of dried leaves and mineral ash that makes the flame low, pale, and almost silent. It doesn't roar, it glows. And in that glow, the council observes the groom. Not for long. Maybe 15 minutes, maybe less. And then, before the sun rises, they deliver their verdict. The verdict, option 1. You will carry your home from today. That means go home to your wife, begin your life, work, build, struggle together. Normal life begins now, or the verdict, option 2. You will rest. The year of the unburdened is yours. That means for the next 12 months, the man does not labor. He is fed by the community, honored at every gathering, treated as a guest of the highest order in his own home. His wife runs the household. His family does not ask him for work. He simply exists in peace. And after that year, he begins his life with his wife, but changed, tested, trusted. Pause. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, that sounds like a great deal for the man and a terrible one for the woman. Hold that thought, because the tradition is more complicated than it looks from the outside, and so is what it's actually testing for. Comment Nyandira if this tradition already has you asking questions. Let's see how many of you are in. What are they actually looking for? For generations, the people of Nyandira tried to reverse engineer the selection. If you could figure out what the council was looking for, you could prepare for it, train for it, maybe even perform it. And a lot of men tried. The first theory was physical. They choose the strongest, people said. A man who can endure the year without working must be physically capable of restraint, of holding himself back. So young men in Nyandira started training harder, working out, building their bodies. 3 weddings later, the most physically impressive man in the valley, a man named Okafor Dube, and who had arms like carved mahogany and a reputation for lifting supplies at the Mashati port that two men couldn't manage, was denied. You will carry your home from today. Physical strength, ruled out. The second theory was lineage. It must be about family, elders in other villages insisted. The council is recognizing bloodlines, men descended from the original settlers of Nyandira, the ones who built the tradition. But then, a man named Selo Kariuki, whose family had been in Nyandira for 5 generations and whose grandfather had himself been unburdened, was rejected without ceremony. Lineage, ruled out. The third theory was spiritual. Some people whispered that the council communicated with ancestors in the night before each wedding, that the fire was a conduit, that they were asking the dead to weigh in on the living. And this one was harder to disprove. But Nyandira, the eldest member of the council, a woman in her late 70s who had been on the council for over 30 years, had said publicly more than once, Nyandira, we are not speaking to the dead, we are watching the living. So what were they watching? Nobody could say for certain, because the council never explained their decisions. They gave the verdict, nothing more. And the strange thing, the thing that made the whole tradition feel almost supernatural, was this. The men who were chosen never seemed to know what they'd done right, and the men who were rejected never seemed to know what they'd done wrong. Pause. Until Tarek. Tarek Mbele changed everything, not because he was extraordinary, but because of the very specific, the very ordinary way he was, and had always been. If you're already trying to figure out what the council was really looking for, you're exactly where I want you. Keep watching. Tarek Mbele of the Outer Edges. Tarek was from the eastern fringe of Nyandira Valley, a stretch of smaller homesteads that sat further from the main village center, closer to the dry savanna that eventually gave way to the scrubland leading toward the Kitala region. He was 31 years old when he married Zuri Nala. Let me tell you about Tarek, because the way I describe him matters. He was not impressive in any of the ways we typically use that word. He wasn't tall in a way that made people stop talking when he entered a room. He wasn't wealthy. He farmed a modest plot and occasionally helped at his uncle's hardware supply store in the nearest town. He didn't have the social charisma of men like Barak Omolo or Fendu Wawaru, who held court at every community gathering and spoke the kind of bold sentences that made people laugh and lean in. Tarek mostly listened. He asked questions more than he made statements. When there was a disagreement at a community meeting, he was the one who let everyone else speak first, and then, quietly, said the thing that somehow ended the argument without shaming anyone. Not because he was calculating, not because he'd read a book on conflict resolution, just because that was genuinely how he moved through the world. And his friend Joram Kasul once described him like this. And I think this is the best description I've heard of any person. Joram Kasule, Tarek's closest friend. Tarek never made you feel like he was doing you a favor by being kind to you. He was just kind, like he'd never been taught to be any other way. When he fell in love with Zuri Nala, people were genuinely surprised. Not because Tarek was unworthy, but because Zuri was, in every measurable sense, the kind of woman who attracted more obvious men. Zuri was sharp, deliberate, deeply respected in Nyandira for her work running a small herbal medicine supply operation that sold into Kavuno City and 2 other regional markets. She was organized in a way that made other organized people feel like amateurs. She'd been proposed to twice before Tarek, turned both down. When she chose Tarek, her mother sat with her the night before the engagement was announced and asked her the question every mother asks. Zuri's mother, is he strong enough for you? Zuri thought about it for a long time. Then she said, Zuri Nala. He's the only man I've ever met who doesn't need me to be smaller for him to feel big. Pause. Her mother didn't say anything else. The wedding was set for the dry season, the traditional time for marriages in Nyandira, when the heat was manageable and the roads were clear enough for family to travel. On the day of the wedding, the community gathered. The food was generous. The music was loud. The dancing went until the stars were directly overhead. And then, as always, the drums went quiet, and Tarek was called. Comment Tarek if you already feel something about this man. Because what happens next is why this story is still being told in Nyandira, the Circle of Grey Ash. This is the part of the story I want you to pay close attention to. Not because of what was asked, but because of how Tarek answered. He walked to the elders' circle alone. It was deep in the night, past 1 a.m. by the estimation of those who were still awake, listening from their homesteads, trying to gauge what was happening by the quality of the silence. The council of gray ash sat at 5 points around the pale fire. Mamanderitu at the top, Elder Bogare to her left, the one people called the counter because he was said to tally things internally before he spoke. Elder Seyon to her right, the quietest of the 5, who had not been seen to smile publicly in years. Elder Kiara and Elder Daka completing the circle, both men who had lived long enough to have seen hundreds of these evenings. Tarek stood at the entry of the circle. He did not fidget. He did not speak first. He simply arrived and waited. Mamanderitu spoke first. Mamanderitu, raise your eyes. Tarek looked up, directly at her. She studied him for a long moment. Not his posture, not his clothes, not his hands, his eyes. Or rather, what was behind his eyes. People who have described what Mamanderitu did in these moments say she wasn't looking at the person the way you look at someone in a conversation. She was looking through the social surface, past the performance of calm, to whatever was underneath it. She had been doing this for 30 years. She had sat before hundreds of grooms, and she knew how to tell the difference between a man who was performing composure and a man who actually had it. She studied Tarek for almost a full minute. Then she asked her question. Mama Inderitu, when your wife brings you her anger, what will you return to her? Pause. Don't rush Tarek's answer. Tarek didn't reach for the obvious answers. He didn't say patience. He didn't say understanding. He didn't perform humility. He thought, just for a moment. The way you think when you're answering from experience, not from an attempt to impress. Then he said, Tarek Mbele, space. I will give her space, until her voice is no longer fighting to be heard. A sound moved through the council. Not words, just a small, almost imperceptible shift, like 5 people adjusting their attention at exactly the same time. Thur Elder Bogger leaned slightly forward. Elder Bogger, and when life denies you what you have earned. This time, Tarek paused longer. This pause mattered, because a man who answers that question immediately, without letting it land, is a man who has a practiced answer ready, an answer designed to sound right rather than be true. Tarek's pause said, I am actually thinking about this. I am checking inside myself to see what is really there. Then he answered, Tarek Mbele, I will grieve it, and then I will keep going, but I will not become the thing that hurt me. Pause. Long pause here. Silence fell over the circle, not the silence of indecision, the silence of recognition. Elder Siyun, the one who had not been seen to smile in years, looked at Mamanderitu. She looked back. Something passed between them. No words, on just a long, settled look. Then Mamanderitu turned back to Tarek. Mamanderitu, you may go home to your wife. Tarek nodded. He turned and walked back through the dark, and the council of gray ash sat by their pale fire until morning. Before I tell you what happened at sunrise, comment right now. What do you think they saw in him? I'm serious. Drop your answer. Some of you are going to be right. When the valley woke up. By the time the sun crested the ridge of Nyandira Valley the next morning, the announcement had already begun to move. The way news moves in a community like Nyandira, not through phones or group chats, but through the specific speed of a thing that surprises everyone equally, it reached every homestead before breakfast. Tarek Mbele has been chosen. For a moment, the valley was quiet. Then the confusion started, because Nyandira had been waiting for this moment. Not specifically Tarek's moment, but a new choosing, a new name to analyze, to measure against the theory of the day. And the name they got was the one almost nobody had predicted. Okafor Dube, the strongest man in the valley, still carrying his rejection from the previous year, heard the news while loading supplies at the eastern market. He said nothing for a long time. Then he said, Okafor Dube, Tarek Mbele. Not angry, not bitter, just confused in the way you are confused when a thing that was supposed to make sense to you doesn't. Fendu Waweru, the most socially connected man in the valley, known for his speeches and his ability to command a room, had been married the previous season and denied. He heard the news from his wife. He sat with it for a minute, then said, "Fendu Wawaru. What does Tarek have that I don't?" His wife didn't answer, but she thought about it. For Zuri Nala, Tarek's new wife, the announcement arrived as she was making tea in their home, still in the particular suspension that the first morning of a marriage puts you in. The neighbor who told her said it quietly, almost reverently. "Neighbor Zuri, your husband has been chosen. The year is his." Zuri set down her cup. She looked out the window at the morning light coming through the trees, and she smiled, not in surprise, in recognition. Pause. She had known something about Tarek that the valley was only now beginning to see. She just hadn't had the language to describe it before. She had it now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear what happens next, because the real answer, the one the elders were actually looking for, is coming. What were they really seeing? 3 days after the announcement, a 12-year-old boy named Kofi Achieng did something that adults in Nyandira had been too proud, or too afraid, to do. He went to Mamandaritu's homestead. He found her sitting outside, sorting dried herbs into small cloth bundles, and he sat down in front of her. She looked at him. "Mamandaritu, you have a question." Kofi Achieng: "I want to understand. My father says Tarek is not the strongest or the smartest or even the most hardworking, so what did you choose him for?" Mamandaritu was quiet for a moment. She kept sorting her herbs, and then she put them down. "Mama Nderitu. We did not choose him for what he has, Kofi Achieng. Then for what?" She leaned forward slightly. Her voice dropped to something just above the sound of the wind in the trees. "Mama Nderitu, for what he does not carry." Kofi frowned. "Kofi Achieng, I don't understand." She nodded slowly, like she'd expected this. "Mama Nderitu, most men come to marriage full, child, full of things they collected before their wife even met them. Pride that demands to be seen, anger that hasn't found its target yet, fear that disguises itself as protection, the belief that love is something owed to them rather than something they give." She paused. "Mama Nderitu, we are not looking for a perfect man. We have never seen one of those. We are looking for a man who has not let those things become his masters." Kofi was listening very hard now. "Kofi Achieng, and Tarek? Mama Nderitu, Tarek came to us unburdened, not empty. A man without depth is useless, but unburdened. His grief was his own. His fears were small and honest. His love was not a transaction." Pause. She picked up her herbs again. The conversation was nearly done, but she said one more thing. "Mama Nderitu, a man who cannot govern what lives inside him will govern his home with those things instead. His wife will pay for wounds she didn't give him. His children will learn fear from someone who called it love. We do not give the year to men who need rest, Kofi. We give it to men who will not misuse it." Kofi sat with that for a long moment. Then he stood up, thanked her, and walked home. Later, as a grown man, Kofi Achieng would become a school teacher in the Katala region, and every year he would begin his class on community and family with that conversation. Word for word. If what Mamanderitu just said hit you differently, subscribe. This channel is where stories like this live. New story every week. What the year of the Unburdened actually looked like. I want to tell you what happened during Tarek's year, because it wasn't what people expected. People assumed that being unburdened meant being idle, that Tarek would spend 12 months sitting under trees, being fed, being praised, being treated like a king while Zuri managed everything. That's not what happened. Tarek spent a significant portion of his year teaching the younger boys in the valley how to repair tools. And not because he was asked to, not because it earned him anything, just because he noticed it needed doing and he had time. He helped his neighbor's elderly mother carry firewood. He sat with men who were struggling in their marriages and listened. Not giving advice, just being the kind of presence that helped people think out loud. He read. He thought. He prayed in the early mornings in a way that was private and consistent and never performed. And he loved Zuri. Not as a man who had been given a gift and was grateful for it, but as a man who showed up for her the way he showed up for everything. Quietly, completely, without expectation of applause. Zuri later told her sister, Zuri Nala, to her sister, That year, I understood something I hadn't understood before. And there is a difference between a man who loves you and a man who needs you. Tarek loves me. He doesn't need me to be anything he hasn't already accepted me as being. When the year ended, Tarek took on the work of his household with the same unhurried, unperforming steadiness he had always carried. Nothing about him had changed. That was the point. He had always been this way. The year hadn't transformed him. It had recognized him. Pause the mirror. Nyandira holds up Nyandira Valley as a fictional place. The Council of Grey Ash doesn't exist. Tarek Mbele is a name I gave to a kind of man I think all of us have either met or wished we had met. But the tradition, the thing it's testing for, that is completely, devastatingly real. Because here is the truth underneath the folklore. Most of us arrive at our most important relationships carrying things we haven't examined. Old anger from parents who withheld love. Old fear from relationships where we were betrayed. Old hunger. For validation, for control, for certainty, dressed up as affection. Old pride that would rather be right than be present. And we bring all of that into the rooms where people are trying to love us. We don't mean to. Most of us don't even know we're doing it. But the people who have to live with us, the people who chose us, they feel every bit of it. Pause. The tradition of Nyandira isn't asking, are you strong enough? It's asking, are you free enough? Free from the weight of your past, free from the need to be in control to feel safe. Free from love that is really just fear of being alone, wearing a warmer coat. Because a man or a woman who is not free from those things will not carry their home. They will burden it, and the people they love will spend their whole lives being strong enough for both of them, without ever being asked if they have the energy to spare. So here is what I want to leave you with tonight. If the Council of Grey Ash called you into their circle right now, not the version of you that you show at work, not the version of you that shows up in public, not the highlights, the actual you, the one that exists at 2 a.m., the one your partner knows, the one you are when no one's watching, what would they see? Would they see someone unburdened? Or would they see someone carrying so much, so quietly, so stubbornly, so invisibly that the people closest to you have been shaped by the weight of it without you ever meaning to hurt them? Pause. Longest pause in the video. There is no shame in carrying things. Every human being carries things. That is not the question. The question is, are you willing to set them down? Not for the elders, not for the tradition, not even for the person you love. For yourself. Because Mama Nderitu was right. The rarest qualification in the world is not power. It's not success. It's not status. It is peace. The kind that lives in your chest regardless of what's happening outside. The kind that doesn't need the room to be quiet because you already are. The kind that lets you love someone without turning that love into a demand. That is the year of the unburdened. And it doesn't start after the wedding. It starts the moment you decide. If this story stayed with you, if something in it landed somewhere you didn't expect, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment. Tell me, what are you carrying right now that you haven't set down yet?